Chapter 1. Sky ducked behind the crumbling concrete street divider. She narrowly dodged the bright red laser beam that the raging green super mutant shot at her. She peeked around the side of the divider and saw 3 of them, 2 with crude wooden pipe pistols, and 1 with a beautifully kept, pitch-black laser rifle in his hands. He'd obviously killed to get it because super mutants didn't have the capacity to so much as think to take one. Sky grabbed her assault rifle and sent several shots barreling towards the mutants, causing gushes of dark blood to spew in different directions, and screams to be let out. "We will feast on your flesh, metal human," one of the mutants tried to intimidate her with his taunts, but this only gave her time to reload and shoot 2 mutants in the head. The only one left ran screaming at her, with his rifle in hand ready to send his fist into her armored face, but he was shot down before he managed to move more than 5 feet towards her. Sky leaned over the twitching mutants, thankful that she had her midnight purple power armor on, and took all that she could from their corpses. She picked up her bag, heavy now from all the ammo she got, and made her way to Diamond City. Sky walked through the ruin-irradiated downtown area of Boston, each footstep thudding under her power armor. It was beginning to get dark and Diamond City was still at least 30 minutes away. She reached up to her helmet and flipped a gritty switch on her left temple. Click. Her bright green eyes flicked on and illuminated her path, showing the broken, discarded ghouls at the side of the road. The sounds of the city grew more violent as darkness descended upon Boston. That would make every step more dangerous than the last. But Sky wasn't afraid. Sky walked into Diamond City and went up to one of the stalls selling their wares. The store sign read Diamond City Armaments. It was in the midfield and was around a noodle shop, which had a robot tending to it. "Kim, I cares for you. Come by and fill your prescription." The Kim dealer spoke slow and articulated, surely drugged out as he was selling Kims for every need. Guards were doing their rounds as they were instructed, and Sky couldn't see their faces as their goggles and umpire masks covered their faces, but the protection was appreciated. "Greetings. That's a fine suit of armor you got there. I'm Arturo. You look new around here. Need any supplies or weapons?" Arturo was a short, black-haired man who spoke with a certain accent she hadn't heard before. He clearly wasn't born here. Sky asked, "Is there some place I can sleep?" "Oh, well, of course. The Dugout Inn. Beds are a little uncomfortable, but the drinks are the best in the Commonwealth." Sky thanked him and bought some ammo for her assault rifle, and then she walked across the old Fenway baseball field that someone turned into a settlement in 2134 to the Dugout Inn. "Hello! Welcome to the Dugout Inn. I'm Vadim. If it is a room, speak to my brother Yefim. If it's food or drink, then I'm your guy." Sky spoke to Vadim first. "What can you tell me about this city?" "Well, the past is a bit bumpy compared to places like Covenant, but you can't be much safer anywhere else." "Any problems in town lately?" Depends if you find synth's a problem. The paper says they come at night to steal your children, your friends, and eventually..." "Yeah, Vadim?" "Eventually they'll get you too!" "Ha ha ha! I kid. But you may want to watch your back. Now, will you be getting anything to drink?" "No, thank you. I'm not really feeling it right now." Sky walked over to Yefim, and his eyes rose to meet her metal helmet. As she could tell, there was a burdened look held in his eyes. "Hello, Skyver. 10 caps for your room." Sky grabbed 10 caps and handed them to Yefim. "Do you know where I can get some work?" Sky asked with a labored look in her eyes. "Near Valentine, the local detective. I hear he's looking for some help. You might want to check with him. His agency is just across town, in the back alley. You're in room 2, just through the door." She thanked him and went through the door to her room. She got out of her armor, slumped down in the dirty, stiff bed, and slept. Sky's eyes shot open. She was strapped to a pale blue table in a bright white room. She's the perfect specimen. High pain tolerance, high immunities, and one of the highest IQs yet. Sky felt a stinging pain as a needle penetrated into her neck. She felt dizzy, and everything began to blur. The three people kept talking, but all their words slurred together, causing her to not be able to understand. Then suddenly, things went black. Skye jolted up. That's the third time this month. It's just a nightmare, nothing more. Skye got back in her armor and made her way to the back alley. She passed many strange characters as she went through the town.
No, she's a synth and I just know it.
You're crazy, Ma. I know her. She's as human as you or me. Wow, they really do seem to be on edge about these synths. When she got to the red door of the agency, she stopped. She could hear soft whirring on the other side. She knocked. Come in, she heard an old grizzled voice say. She turned the rusted knob and went in. Skye couldn't believe her eyes. There in the chair before her was a synth, a robot made to look human by the Institute. The Institute. The boogeymen of the Commonwealth. Everybody knows how they snatch people from their homes, their jobs, their lives, and send their coursers to replace them with their synths. They look as human as the rest of us, and they can go berserk and kill with no discretion. Skye shook her head and focused back on Nick. She looked at his pale, gray, synthetic skin, some of it torn on his left side, running down his neck to expose the gears and wires inside, sparking every so often. She watched his metal, yellow, soulless eyes look her up and down, examining her. The trench coat, the fedora, and the cigarette between his lips pegged him as the detective. Hey there, sweetheart. I'm Nick Valentine, the local detective. People don't come here by mistake, and people definitely don't come here to visit, so what do you need? She looked him over one last time before getting out of her armor and sitting in the chair in front of the desk. I heard you're looking for help. I thought I'd do it. Nick took a puff of his cigarette, making the ember glow a gleaming bright orange. Yeah, there's this one case. It's on the east side of Boston, people going missing and calling cards being found all over the place. They all say Pickman's Gallery on them. Head over there and see what you can find. 200 caps when you get back, and be careful. I heard this guy doesn't use paint in his art. Skye was too confused to ask what he meant, so she set off to the wreckage of East Boston, to Pickman's Gallery. Skye was 2 blocks away when she heard raiders talking amongst themselves. So this Pickman guy, why are we going after him? Come on, man, haven't you heard? He's a psycho. He's been carving up our gang and using their entrails and his paintings. He even got Wire and Liz. Dang. Those were some of the higher-ups. Skye avoided the potential conflict and set up a post 100 feet from Pickman's door. When she was confident her spot wouldn't be found, she sat in her chair and watched the door for who went in and who left. The creaks and groans of the building around her created an atmosphere that made her uneasy and more cautious. No, that's too much electricity! You'll fire if you keep that up! Skye was jerking back and forth as electricity coursed through her head, and they did their dreadful experiments. She was back in the white room, on the same pale blue table. One of the men leaned towards her. He was bald, refined, had a scar across his left eye, and he wore a black jacket. She'll make a perfect Gen 4 synth. Skye rocketed up from her seat. Another nightmare. It has to be. She must have drifted off while she was watching the door. She got back in her armor and looked towards the door. It was busted down in fragments and she could hear shuffling inside. She looked around, watching for any movement in the surrounding area. After a moment of nothing, she started for the door. The splintered, blood-stained door crunched under her armored foot. Everybody, come on! We found a tunnel in the wall! He went this way! Skye walked down the rotten hallway to be met by raiders coming around the corner. Before they could scream their warning, her gauntleted hand had them by the throat, and their voice muffled while their feet started kicking violently as she lifted them off the floor, and they struggled to break free of her infinitely powerful grasp. The struggling stopped, and they went limp in her hands. She dropped their lifeless bodies to the floor. Skye made her way up the creaking stairs of the old, decrepit gallery. She reached the second floor, and the stench hit her like bricks. It smelled as if a deathclaw died long ago and started to rot, and whoever lived here was basking in the stench. She walked cautiously down the hallway, checking for raiders as she went. She came to the final, large, blood-soaked room on the end of the hallway, and the smell became more intense as she saw the massive pile of decaying bodies in the middle of the painting-adorned room. Skinless heads on pikes and eyes hanging from the fixtures made her gag. The candles that were made of earwax retrieved from the people's heads were burning a monotonous red, causing the odor to worsen and the room to look a dull vermilion. The paintings were something out of her worst nightmare. There were paintings of pitch-black figures with no eyes, open graves with spider-like creatures crawling out, and men with multiple faces, fangs sticking every direction out of their mouths. Men with bright eyes seemed to follow her, and floating apparitions intent on her destruction. She approached one painting called A Day in the Park, and saw a soulless, dark void floating in a park. The creature was pointing at her, as if beckoning her to come join him. She could have swore it moved when her eyes went black and she fell to the floor. Sky's head arose as she saw the gate in front of her. She looked around to see the scientist behind the glass windows, taking notes on her. Her eyes grew wide as the gate groaned open. Sky heard a deep, powerful huff as an animal came out with one hairy fist making dents in the ground, one after the other. She saw the bat in her hands, but it dropped in fear as she braced herself on the gated wall keeping her in. She kept hearing the thuds of the infinite terror as the animal lunged towards her and knocked her down. "Fight it!" Sky jerked up and was utterly terrified that she uttered those words. She got up and made sure to grab her weapon off the floor. After examining the horror that seemed to look back at her, she looked to the corner of the room to find the tunnel the raiders were speaking of. As Sky took a step towards the tunnel, she could smell a musk that was different from the horror she just saw. She heard the crunching of footsteps on bones that could have been there for an eternity, and she heard a muffled, mad voice in the distance. The exposed brick was stained with a dull red, dried blood from Pickman's past victims. There were cracks in the bricks where the victims had fought back from his strange axe. Sky advanced in the tunnels, taking a right, then a left, then two rights, and then she saw more raiders. She looked at the skeleton beside her and found a knife beside him. She got out of her armor, causing a noise that was loud enough to make the raiders stop in their tracks. Sky crouched down and heard the raiders talking as they neared to her. "Pickman's been getting us for how long now?" "A good 3 years. He's just out of sight every time, and he knows what he's doing." Sky heard them before she saw them around the corner. Sky plunged the knife into the shin of the raider closest to her, and when he fell down, she brought up her assault rifle to shoot the other raider. He shifted to the left and dodged the bullet that ricocheted by his skull. He pulled up his pistol to take aim at her, but she moved as quickly as he pulled the trigger. Sky screamed as the bullet entered her leg, causing blood to spew towards the downed raider's eyes. She shot the standing raider in the head and quickly twisted the other's neck to break it. She went back to her bag and grabbed a stim pack and plunged it into her leg. The pain stopped for a little while, and she got up, hid the bodies, and got back in her armor, ready to find Pickman. Sky crouched at the edge of the crumbling drop-off. The 10-foot drop into the large chamber at the end of the tunnel, where Pickman was surrounded by 4 raiders, was nothing for her armor.
Well, well, well. We finally found you, you little rat. It was fine when you were getting those low-level jerks, but when you killed Jessica, the woman I loved, oh boy, did you cross a line. And we're gonna make sure you pay, Pickman, with your life, and you better believe I'm doing it. And it's gonna be slow and painful, with a knife and a smile.
"You killed Betty first. You've had this coming a long time, friend," Pikmin's voice was cool and calm, like cold water in a clear, clean stream during summer when the breeze blows just right. He seemed to not be afraid of the 4 guns pointed at his head. Pikmin looked up and saw Sky sitting there, about to jump off, and he gave her a wink. Sky powered her collision absorption mechanism in her legs and jumped down, sending a monstrous thud through the ground, knocking everyone but her and Pikmin to the ground.
Gage, get down now!
One of the raiders was charging towards Sky with a sledgehammer, and as he swung to hit her, she lifted her armored forearm to catch the blow. The surprise and regret on the raider's pale, scared face was all too evident as Sky sent her other hand plunging into the raider's shin, shattering it into oblivion. The raider's scream sounded shrill and panicky. Sky sent a shot ringing out, and the raider's screams were silenced. She looked up to find the other 2 raiders gutted on the floor, and Pikmin, in his now bloodied suit, doing a trick with his knife in his hand as he walked toward the scared, broken Gage, who had blood running down his legs. "You don't have to do this, Pikmin. I'll leave and never come back. I'll leave the whole Commonwealth. Please!" Betty said please too, didn't she? Was all he said as he put an end to the twisted, horrified Raider Lord. "Thank you for the help, killer. They deserved worse than death. I only ever killed raiders, just like you. You only kill the bad guys. So what's wrong with me doing it? I use them for my paintings while you let them rot and fester." Sky was puzzled and troubled by what he said, and then she left, taking the reward Pikmin gave, his prized dagger.
"So how'd it go?"
asked Nick as Sky sat down. Sky explained what had happened and what Pikmin had said.
"Well, as long as the calling cards quit showing up, I'm fine. Here's your caps, and a little something extra."
Sky thanked Nick, got up, and went back 10 miles north to her home in Concord. Sky saw her makeshift shack in the distance. It may be falling apart and needs to be repaired every 2 weeks, but this place was home. She opened the black door, with the mark on the door hinge alerting people she meant no harm. She locked the door behind her and entered the main living area, beside where she stored her valuables. The pristine white chair in the corner beside the cap stash was a good enough place to take a load off. She disembarked her power armor at its docking station and sat down to count her caps. 102, 103, 104. Caps fell out of her hands when she felt something off. There was a strange, eerie feeling in the air. The feeling became more acute as she was blinded by an electric blue light, and a bald man with a scar across his left eye, wearing a black jacket, stood before her in her living space. "I'm Kellogg. I'm here representing the Institute. I need you to come with me."